Welcome back to Black Doctors Podcast. I am Dr. Stephen Bradley, your host. Thanks for joining us. We are going to pick up where we left off with last week's episode. We had the host from the WealthMindedMD podcast. They joined us. They gave us their 5-step process to having better success with your finances as a physician. I think we got through the first 2 or 3 last week, and we're going to wrap up that conversation this week. June is right around the corner, and we will be celebrating 4 years on air. The Black Doctors Podcast has been around for 4 years. It's hard to believe. It's been a wild ride. Every year around this time, I like to reflect. So the episodes lined up for the month of June will be a little different. We're going to probably kick off with kind of reflections, and I'm going to talk about podcasting, why I started, the things I've learned along the way, things that you should consider if you're thinking about starting a podcast. And then I'm going to probably spend a little more time talking. I enjoy having guests because it allows me to kind of hide and I don't have to say as much or carry the conversation. But people have said you have a wealth of knowledge that you should be sharing. So I'll be talking about my pathway into medicine, why I chose anesthesia, the many odd jobs I had along the way, from construction to being a sandwich artist at Subway to my music major background. So that'll be some of the episode content for the month of June. Really going to enjoy sharing more about myself. We'll talk about military medicine. We'll talk about my concept on finding happiness in most things, but especially as a physician, this field, we're so prone to burnout and we see a lot of negativity. So I'll definitely have an episode where I talk about how I maintain positivity and how I maintain a really, really good work-life balance. We'll hear from our new sponsor and then jump into this week's episode. This episode of the Black Doctors Podcast is sponsored by TrueLearn. TrueLearn Smart Banks combine high-quality exam-style practice questions to help you prepare for that incredibly important test you're about to take. They have question banks designed for the USMLE exams as well as for 9 different medical specialties. I used TrueLearn to prepare for American Board of Anesthesiology board exam. They also have question banks designed for allied health professionals such as nurse practitioners and physician assistants. Check out the show notes for a special discount code that'll help you save money when you sign up for one of their question banks. Test your best with TrueLearn, the data-driven approach to exam preparation. Loans that they're going to have to pay back later. But I think that kind of leads us into the next recommendation. It talks about saving or how much of your pay you're saving. Where do we go from here?
So, I'm a firm believer that you need to be intentional about what you're going to do with your money. And that starts during your time in residency, but is definitely true when you become an attending. Because oftentimes if you have no plan, things just sort of happen. And you can find yourself getting paid a lot and still not know where your money is going. And I know for any trainee, so any resident or fellow that's listening to this, it probably is like going in one ear out the other, right? Because you're like, okay, I only make 60 grand or 70 grand right now. How could I not make this work when I'm making 200 or 300 or more, right? You just, it's hard to fathom how people could even struggle with that amount of money. And as my dad used to say, you just keep on living because things happen and bills accrue and expenses come up and your debt needs to be paid off. And all of a sudden you can find that you get paid money and it just comes right out. I remember feeling like a resident or being a resident and feeling that way where I got paid and immediately it was like, okay, well, by the time I like feed myself and like pay my rent and like put gas in my car, there's like nothing left. And then it was like, well, I don't want to waste these vacation days that I have. And my friends are traveling to cool places and I want to go too. So then I would want to go on vacation and I wouldn't have the money to pay for it. So then I'd get a credit card and I'd pay it and I'd charge the credit card and I'd tell myself I was going to pay it off. And then it was just this never ending cycle. And I'd like to help people. We'd like to help people prevent that, to stop that cycle. And I think it really starts with being intentional and doing what we like to call paying yourself first. What does that mean? That means as soon as you get paid, as soon as that money hits your bank account, taking 10% of it when you become an attending physician, ideally 20% of it, and saving it, right? Putting it away, taking that off the top, and then taking what's left over, paying your bills and things like that. Because I find that what happens is everybody's like, okay, well, I'm gonna just save what's left over. And the problem is there's never anything left over, right? It's like 1 month you got this expense and you're like, well, this was an anomaly. I don't normally have this expense. And then the next month something happens and you're like, oh, well, this is an anomaly. This normally doesn't happen, right? It's like, oh, well, my friends invited me to brunch. They're not in town that much. So that's why I spent too much. And then the next month it's like, oh, well, I was going on vacation. I don't go on vacation every month. So that's why that happened. And then the next month it's like, oh, my car broke down. It doesn't normally break down. And then basically what I'm saying is each month something happens. I don't know about y'all, but something happened to me. And so I was like, you know what? I need to just go ahead and take this off the top. Because for me, it was like, okay, if I know that I already reserved money that I was going to use for saves and I already paid my bills, I know I can spend what's left over and I'm feeling good, right? Then when I log into my checking account, I'm like, okay, we good this month. I'm going to go to brunch a couple of times. I'm going to have a couple of drinks. I'm going to have a good time. And so, my point in saying all this is being really intentional about what you do with the money that you get once you get paid. And one of the ways to do that is to really start saving off the top. And so I remember when I was a resident, I made a goal of saving 10%. Every time I got paid, I just put 10%, put it in my savings account. When I became an attending, that percentage increased to 20%. But I think that's a really good goal to start with.
Yeah. And I recently gave this talk about financial wellness to a group of physicians, some attending, some medical students, residents, fellows. And their question was, well, is that more? Like, is 20% more than the average American? And 20% is a nice benchmark. It is a little bit more than the average American. You might hear that the average American needs to save about 15%. But as a physician, you are a high income earner, right? And the reason for saving this is for the joys that Leisha talked about, right? To protect yourself from any type of emergency. So even if it goes a little bit over what you might have stashed away, you still have some additional cash flow to support yourself so you don't have to take out and accumulate more debt. And the reason why you're saving is because I don't know about you all, but I don't want to work for forever, right? And so this helps you to prepare for that future self. It's an investment in your future self. And when we think about saving and how to do that effectively, I love what Leisha said. Pay yourself first, okay? Because you paying everybody else, but you have to prioritize your own joy, prioritize your own well-being, and that's part of financial wellness. And how you do this is to put the money away. What I like to do is put it away in a high yield savings account. This will give you a higher return on that saving amount. Because if you just put it in a brick and mortar bank, you would get about 0.1% interest paid of the amount that's saved. That's nothing. Pennies, literally. But I like looking at my high yield savings account I have Discover and seeing that, oh, this month we earned this amount of money. Now, as you put away more money, then you will get a better return on your investment. But of course, it's not going to be the same as investing in the stock market because it's not going to be subjected to that same risk, right? This is something that you're putting away and you're going to have kind of that guaranteed low conservative return. But the reason why you put it in a high yield savings account is because we know with inflation, the money that we save today is being eroded by inflation. So it's not going to have the same value, right? So you're trying to always combat that. Typically, inflation is about 2 to 3% per year. So if you have to aim for a target of the high yield savings account, you want to at least return about 2 to 3% per year. But we know that inflation has been at an all-time high. We're in this high inflationary environment and we're feeling the burden of that, right? So these are some of the things. They're small shifts. Instead of putting your money like under a pillow or in a grave or wherever it is, I don't know. My grandparents, they did some crazy stuff back in the day. And I understand why they did that because of all of the historical trauma that occurred to them and their finances. And this is the way that they protect their assets because if it's in a house where nobody knows about it, whatever. But what we're saying is we want to teach you ways to kind of reconcile that historical trauma and to do better to protect yourself in the future. And one of the ways to do that is by saving for your future self, saving for your joys today, and making sure that you account for some of the external factors that can impact the value of that money.
Man, 20% 20% of, is that a take home?
Everybody asked me that. I knew it. I knew it was coming.
That's going to hurt a little bit. I don't like that.
Stephen, I felt it. I knew. Every time I do this, I get asked the same question. Leisha, is that gross or net? And it's oftentimes it's like not the residents who ask me, it's the attendings, because I realize how much money taxes is taken out of their check. And they're like, whoa, what we doing now, Leisha? Come on now. I say usually net. Gross is a great goal. If you could just start with net, I think that's a great starting point. Like even net kind of high, but saving 20% in cash, and like Brittne said, that money in cash is to build your emergency fund. I'm a big believer in paying cash for cars. That's another discussion for another day. But saving in advance for any future car that you might need or any car repair that you might have, for people who are hoping to buy a home, saving for a down payment on a home, for people who are dating and hoping to get married soon, saving for a wedding. There's a lot of large expenses that people have, especially younger physicians. Some people are saving for childcare or saving to, be able to afford a child and the cost of daycare. And so whatever it is, saving money in cash, even I think the COVID pandemic taught us a lot that our jobs aren't guaranteed and that there could be interruptions to our cash flow and to jobs that might impact our income. And so again, saving money in cash to protect you against all of those things I think is vitally important.
That's perfect. So we've covered so much ground already. We talked about creating a vision. We talked about protecting yourself with insurance, how to make a plan for your debt and maybe not accrue so much debt from jump. Just talked about saving 20% of your pay. Didn't like that one, but we'll work on that. And then, so where do we go from here? What's the final step in your plan for setting yourself up for success?
The final step is investing. I don't know about you. I think there's a lot of FOMO with investing because we hear on social media, this person invested in this, cryptocurrencies, whatever. I'm getting X return on investment. I want to say that investing is something that we all need to do because it allows for our money to grow passively, right? And what you choose to invest in is going to be up to you depending on your risk tolerance, right? Because if you choose more risky investments, likely they will allow for greater return on that investment. But again, you're subjected to greater risk. So I think what you choose to invest in might vary, but you want to ensure that you're investing because a lot of times you just have that money sitting in cash. And I talked about inflation, right? We want to outpace inflation and investing allows you to do so. Investing also allows for your money to grow without your time, without your energy, without you talking to your husband or your partner about who's going to go to work, how much you bring in. You just put that money aside and you let it work for you. Investing also allows for you to actually save on taxes because of differences in how money is taxed. Ordinary income, that's the money you're earning, is taxed differently from your investment income, right? So this just allows for that diversification. And really, I think a great option, and we talk about this on the podcast, episode 6, we talk about Roth IRAs. And Leisha and I have different experiences with this. We're not going to jump into the details, but I think one of a great vehicle to use for investing as a resident physician is using a Roth IRA and putting money away directly into a Roth IRA every single month if you can, and just kind of building that in. And so that's the account that you're using. And then from there, you have to actually invest that in money and choose whatever investment fancies you. Whenever I think about investing, though, I like to look at the expenses, right? And choose a low cost index fund that allows you to be diversified with minimal expenses.
Yeah. So I love that. I can talk for hours about investing. So I'm going to spare everybody here in the audience that. But whenever I'm teaching on this, because I do a lot of financial wellness workshops, and one of the topics that everyone always wants is, how do I start investing? Right. And so, during those talks, I always talk about the different kinds of investments, how you can invest in the stock market, how you can invest in real estate, how you can invest in other businesses, and you can invest in alternatives. Alternatives meaning commodities, collectibles, and cryptocurrency, right? But oftentimes, one of the easiest ways to start investing is through the stock market. And the reason why that's one of the easiest ways to start, and one of the ways that I would encourage you to at least think about starting, is because it's easiest to do that through your job. And oftentimes as physicians, you get tax benefits and asset protection benefits for investing money through your job and things like your work retirement plans. And so those are those things that they give you the option to sign up for when you first start. And you probably are looking at the forms and don't really know what they mean, but they offer a lot of tax benefits. And when we say investing, the purpose of investing is to increase your net worth and build wealth. And you'll learn, especially when you become an attending, that one of the detriments to you being able to increase your net worth and build wealth is the amount of money that you pay in taxes. And so if you can invest money and give your money a chance to grow exponentially and also decrease your taxes, that's a great way and a great place to start. And oftentimes one of the ways that you can do that is through your work retirement plans. And so if you work for a for-profit institution, that's going to be a 401k. If you work for a nonprofit institution or a healthcare system, that's a 403b. If you're in the military, it's called the TSP, the Thrift Savings Plan. If you are usually a 401k, but you want to look into these different types of work retirement plans. One, because they give you those tax benefits. Two, because they have those asset protection benefits. And three, because oftentimes you're given free money to do so. Oftentimes, a lot of jobs will give you something called a match, meaning if you put in 5% of your pay, they'll put in an extra 5% of your pay. It's like, yo, I don't know about you, but I'm trying to get all the extra money that I can. As a resident, maybe you can only invest 5% of your pay or 10% of your pay. But when you become an attending, oftentimes it's not unreasonable to go ahead and max that account out. So contribute the maximum each year, which for 2024 is around $23,000. And so it's saying, okay, I'm going to contribute the maximum to this account so that I know that I'm investing. And then Brittne was sort of talking about, okay, well, once you put the money in the account, you actually have to invest the money in the account. And that's a step that a lot of doctors forget, right? There's like, they got a lot of money in there and they didn't invest it. And so a lot of employers nowadays, in order to prevent that money from just sitting in cash in that account, they have a default investing option, which is usually some form of index mutual funds or a target date retirement fund. I won't get into the weeds, but I think a good way to sort of think about an index fund is a group of stocks or a group of bonds. And an index fund is a group of stocks or a group of bonds that follows an index. So people have heard of like the S&P 500 or the total stock market index fund. Those are oftentimes really good places to start. I'm not a financial advisor, neither is Brittne. We're not tax professionals. We're not lawyers. So I want you to vet all this information through whomever you've hired to help you if you have someone that you've employed. But I'm saying this to say that one of the ways to set yourself up for success is to start investing, right? Because it's hard to save your way to wealth. Oftentimes you need to invest in order to even reach your financial goals. And there's different sort of categories of investments that you can make. But one of the first that you should consider is through the stock market, through things like your work sponsored retirement plans, like a 401k or 403b.
Amazing. The generational barriers that we're seeing broken, these, being Black women physicians, that's not an easy feat, who have gone on to educate yourselves. Again, this is a representative of years and years of Brittne and Altelisha educating themselves on finance and money matters to then bring it back to help other people. It's definitely to be applauded. Thank you both so much for coming on the podcast. In summary, we talked about a 5-step plan, which was creating a vision, protecting yourself, making a plan for your debt, making a plan to save 10 to 20% of your pay, and then finally to start investing. If you had questions, you're like, man, I wish they really talked about X, Y, and Z more. This was just the preview. Go to check out their podcast. Again, it's on all the streaming platforms, WealthMindedMD. They're going to dive more into the details. As we wrap up, I do want to ask, we talked a lot about savings and a lot of stuff that it wasn't fun. But I think we also have our guilty pleasures. I'll go first. My splurge, I splurge on musical instruments. If you follow me on social media and you see, much to my wife's dismay, I often splurge on a music instrument. And then it occasionally graces my Instagram page. Some of them sound better than others. Some of them I'm still learning to play. I'm kind of on a cap. I ran out of real estate to house my instruments, and it's getting out of hand. So I'm on hold for now. That is my guilty kind of pleasure. I'm curious what yours are.
So right now, my splurge is not one that I do often, but we're purchasing a new home. And
congrats.
Thank you. So a home purchase, of course, is like one of the largest investments that you'll make during your lifetime. And it's a huge splurge, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity and just how blessed this buying process has been. Other smaller splurges for me is maybe I went to Home Depot with the kids, and we bought a lot of soil and plants. I'm like, ooh, I think I'm over my head. And, we have broccoli and kale and, all types of flowers. So we will see if I can keep them alive this summer. Last year, we had a little snafu with maggots in my blueberry bush.
Oh, no. Get Kevin out there with some overalls in the garden.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay, so my splurge is travel. Brittne knows this about me. I love to travel. And one of the things that I've become really savvy about is utilizing credit card points for luxury travel experiences. And so recently flew first class to South Africa, booked some all-inclusives in Madrid and Cabo, and a lot of it really cheaply because I'm a pretty frugal person. And so I've gotten really skilled at utilizing credit card points for first class travel and resort travel in fancy hotel stays. And so that's not necessarily to brag. This is not like me spending 20 grand on this luxury vacation. It's really utilizing credit card points, which we talk about on our podcast, to have these amazing experiences. But yeah, I went to South Africa, a family vacation with my parents, my brothers and their spouses. So that was really fun. Got an upcoming trip to the south of France. Actually going to go to Saint-Tropez trip. One of my co-fellows is getting married in France. I know it sounds very fancy, but that's not my wedding. Definitely, colleague's wedding. And I was like, hey, Alicia, I'm life of the party. So, I get invited. And so really excited for that. A lot of my friends are getting married, having babies. And so just being able to travel to see them has been my splurge. So mine is more travel.
I love it. And in 2024, we're going to stop apologizing. We worked hard. We're still very,
I love it.
We still make very good decisions. Your financial decision is much better than mine, but I'm getting there. But yeah, is this episode about points? You have a podcast episode about how to these credit card points?
I don't know when this episode will launch and when our one on points will launch, but yes, we've got some that are upcoming. So people stay tuned in the month of May, and heading into June, we do a few episodes where we really talk all about it.
Fantastic. Well, I will definitely, I'm going to follow your podcast today, and I'll definitely tune into this one about credit card points. Dr. Halford, Dr. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us on Black Doctors Podcast. So excited to see where you go on your show, WealthMindedMD, and thank you for all of the fantastic information you provided today. Thank you for tuning in to the Black Doctors Podcast. We're here because representation matters. Thanks so much for joining us on the Black Doctors Podcast. Tune in next week. We're going to, start a victory lap episode or victory lap run of podcast episodes to celebrate 4 years on the air, 4 years of the Black Doctors Podcast. Thanks for tuning in every week. We're here because representation matters. The production, audio, editing, content is all performed by yours truly. The music, I've composed all the music for the show as well. I'll Stephen Bradley, MD, under the domain of EquiHealth Media Consultants. Thanks for joining.